Of course, you know, when the bombs came down Pearl Harbor, everything was chaotic. They were calling for volunteers, and so those of us who went to the University of Hawaii had 2 years of required ROTC training in those days. And therefore, we decided that we will volunteer to the Hawaii Territorial Guard. And so we went, and they issued, we didn't have any military clothing, but in our civilian, the way we were dressed, they gave us a gun, 1903 Springfield rifle, 30 caliber, with one clip, which is only 5 rounds. So what you want to do is, when the enemy attacks, you shoot the 5 rounds and you've got to take off. Well, anyway, my first assignment was at the Alawai boat harbor. You know, there was a fear that the Japanese might try to land, and I guess we were to sound off if we saw them. But anyway, fortunately, you know, no attempts made. And so we were in the Guard for about nearly 2 months, guarding various installations. You know, the water tank up at the Wilhelmina Rise. I guess they were afraid of sabotage. There was an electric station out at Kuli'o'o, and we guarded over there. There was a water pump in Kapahulu, and we guarded that. But after about nearly 2 months, we were all called back, and we were summarily dismissed. And the reason for that was because of our Japanese ancestry. And that was a big blow. We all cried. Our friends joined us, but there wasn't anything we could do. We were no longer American citizens. In fact, we were classified as enemy alien, mind you. But anyway, there wasn't anything we could do. And so we waited for a chance to do whatever we could do. We waited about a year when finally the military decided that it would use the Niseis. And so the 442nd was called up. The 442nd, well, the quota was to get 1,500 from the mainland and 1,500 from Hawaii. But you know what happened to the mainland Japanese? They were all rounded up and put in concentration camps. And so they didn't get a good response from them. But in Hawaii, they were calling for 1,500, and 10,000 of us said we wanted to do our part. Well, anyway, I was one of those picked, and I went to 442nd to Camp Shelby in Mississippi. And they did our infantry training there. And just about, well, we were fighting the chiggers and the snakes, you know. In Hawaii, we don't have any snakes. But anyway, after the basic infantry training, and when we were ready to go to on maneuvers, 250 of us who had some knowledge of the Japanese language were picked up, and we were sent up to Minnesota, a place called Camp Savage, out about 80 miles out of St. Paul. And this was a Japanese language school. And for 6 months, we did intensive learning of the Japanese language, which, if some of you know, is one of the most difficult languages. You know, the kanji, the Chinese characters, and all that you had to memorize. But after 6 months, we graduated. And those of us who graduated got farmed out to different units fighting the war against Japan. And I think the demand for interpreters just kept on growing. because when the commanders out in the field learned how valuable the linguists were, they just wanted them with them. And so we were all scattered. We were not like the 442nd just remained one unit, but we were all pulled out and attached to different units. I was selected in a team of 10 and headed for Australia. Ended up in Brisbane, headquarters, General MacArthur. And there we did translation work. All the documents from the front were funneled in. And so all the material came flowing in, and we did the translation. And after about 6 months there, went up to New Guinea, a place called Hollandia, and we did the same thing, but in a smaller group out there. And then I ended up in the Philippines. And 6 months I was there, getting the documents, but getting now ready to move into Japan for the final. Okinawa battle was over, and we were getting ready. Fortunately, I was then commissioned with some of the others, became an officer, and I got attached to the Public Relations Office. Then that is an office that handled all the war correspondents who had gathered in the Pacific area. And that was my ticket to being on the Missouri, because wherever the correspondents went, well, I tagged along. And there were about 150 of the war correspondents there, radio, all and I don't know why I went that route, because I had no experience. And so it says in that leaflet that I was a reporter, but I felt more like a tourist. So anyway, when fortunately the announcement by the emperor saying that they were ready to quit fighting, that's when we all felt elated. Oh, now the war is going to be over. We can come home. And so we planned to move into Japan. And we got on the plane, landed in Okinawa, spent overnight there, and moved into Otsugi Airfield in Japan, and waited for MacArthur to come so that he will be properly, photographed. And you've seen that clip when he landed in Japan. And then we went down to Yokohama, billeted there, and on September 2nd, that we got on a destroyer, went out to the middle of Tokyo Bay, where the Missouri was, and witnessed the signing of the surrender by the Japanese, as you've seen in that clip. So that's the reason for being there. I was on one of the decks there with the correspondent. And I don't know whether you noticed, but there was a deck with photographers. And these were the photographers representing the newspapers and so on. The other deck in which I was all the ones, who witnessed and to turn in their articles to their paper. And so after about 6 months in Japan, I came home, discharged. 3 years, full 3 years in ship. So that's my story of being on that. So I was not a reporter or correspondent or anything like that. So that's